One of the first things that we want to assess when it comes to someone coming in for improving their breathing or optimizing their breathing for athletic performance and mental stability is looking at the rib cage. The rib cage mobility is a very important part of your respiratory system. It needs to have that 360 degrees of expanse, and quite often we see that that is not the case, even with athletes at a high level. So we want to assess this in the easiest, most efficient way possible to look at the biomechanics before we look at how they breathe and the biochemistry thereafter. Now, the reason why this is super important is because ribcage rigidity can actually increase things like anxiety and stress levels, which is adding to that mental load when it comes to athletic performance, but also it increases and encourages you to use the upper chest for shallow, faster breathing. It doesn't let you use the diaphragm as efficiently, which is also important for things like movement and stability and balance in your sport, as well as it also impacts things like the pelvic tilt as well, and can quite often encourage an anterior pelvic tilt, which causes other biomechanical problems. So as you can see, this leads out to quite a lot of different things if you have ribcage rigidity. So this is the number one thing to assess. So let's look here at two ways that you can look at how to assess it, and you can do right now here at home, and then comment below how they went for you. This is the shoulder internal rotation assessment to see whether or not you have any rib cage rigidity. You have poor movement in the front part of that rib cage. So what you're going to do here is you're going to lay on the floor or a bench somewhere comfortable, where you can lay with your arm out at a 90-degree angle from your body, your shoulder level with your elbow, not up high or too down low, but just nice and level with the shoulder joint. And you want to have your hand up in this 90-degree position with your palm facing towards your feet. And what you're going to do here is you're going to slowly move the arm down, the palm down to your hips, just like this. And you want it in a nice controlled manner. And if you feel any tension or any stiffness to it, you need to stop, because that's failing the assessment basically, but we'll get into why. And if you can pull your hand down, you'll find at a certain point the shoulder needs to internally rotate so you can move the hand behind the core. But what we want to assess here, and like I said before, if you have any stiffness in this joint as you move it, that fails the assessment, then there could be a problem with the rigidity with the ribcage movement and mobility there. But what we're also looking for is if the shoulder, the wrist, or the ribs move. So as you have your hand here, quite often to reach your palm to the floor, you'll subconsciously move the wrist down to achieve it, because you know there's stiffness in there. It might not be stiff enough to stop you, but it'll be stiff enough that you'll move the wrist down so you can reach the floor. So you want to keep that wrist nice and straight. Also, you want to make sure that you're not using the shoulder predominantly. Like I said, you'll need to use the shoulder towards the very, very end of this assessment, but you shouldn't need to, from the beginning, be lifting the shoulder joint up the whole way so that you can get that internal rotation. You should only need it right at the end, which is a natural movement. This shows rigidity. Also, like I said, you're moving the hand past the core. So if you have an internally rotated ribcage or ribcage rigidity, the mobility of the ribcage will mean that you'll subconsciously push this ribs up so you can move the hand behind. So it will look something like this. You'll move the hand down and then you'll move the ribcage up. So you want to keep the ribcage, the body to the floor or the bench, whatever you're laying on, the shoulder to the floor or the bench, whatever you're laying on, and don't bend the wrist. Keep a solid wrist the whole time. So if you need to move the ribcage up, or if you need to move the shoulder up, you need to move the wrist down, these are all fails. It shows that you've got some ribcage rigidity and you need to work on the mobility on the front part of your ribcage. This may be because, or quite commonly is with clients, is that it is stuck in an exhalation position, so it's internally rotated, and so you're moving the ribcage up or the shoulder joint up to compensate. These are all compensatory mechanisms that you want to be avoiding, and so you need to be working on them. This is the shoulder flexion assessment you can use to assess the anterior part of your rib cage to assess the mobility there. What you're going to want to do is have your hands flat to your side, nice and snug towards your hip. You're going to have a slight bend in the elbow and palm facing up. And what you want to do is reach the hand straight up and over your head like this. Nice, easy motion, not forcing it, not pushing it, nothing like that, and just straight up and over. So you want to have good mobility in this flexion. The things to look out for here, which can fail the test. Now there's a few different things. If you're coming up and over the head and you feel that the elbow needs to flare out, that's a fail. If you feel like as you come up and over the head, the wrist needs to go in, that's a fail. So the shoulder goes out and the wrist goes in, that's a fail. Also, if you feel like to reach over your head, you need to move the body rib cage upwards to do so. This is also a fail because this is showing other compensatory mechanisms that might be in play here. So you don't want to be reaching over and then flexing the back up so you can make that reach. You want to keep the back and the rib cage nice and flat towards the floor or bench, whatever you may be lying on. So this is how you can assess whether or not the posterior part of your rib cage has any problems there as well. Now, a quite common thing to point out here before we sign off is that if you come up and over the head and you might feel some tension, it is possible to push through it. But pushing through it is using muscles instead of the joint. So this shows other compensatory mechanisms might be at play because you could use the muscles to push through. But really, as soon as you feel a slight movement in the shoulder and the elbow facing out, the palm going in, ever so slight, stop. If you feel any tension and you're having to push through with the muscles, stop. If you're having to move the rib cage up, stop. All of these are fails for the assessment. And what we really want to see is, can you do this nice and freely with no strain at all, no movement in the trunk? And that shows good shoulder flexion, and it's a good sign of the assessment and your rib cage overall mobility. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you found those two assessments helpful. If you did, make sure to comment below how they went for you if you give them a go, because we are all super interested to hear that in this community of optimizing our breath. But also make sure to sign up to the Insider Advantage, which is a new free educational platform, which you'll get an email to your inbox periodically with great things like this. So be sure to sign up for that to get another free resource that you can further use to optimize your breathing. And if you want to take this any further, sign up to my programs, the Body Revival course or the Breathing Mechanics course, which are out right now.